Oh, they're getting desperate now. What's up, everyone? Jared from Patriots and Pop Culture here, and let's do a little follow-up on that anime and manga taking over U.S. comic sales video from a couple of weeks ago. Because in the past 10 days, we've seen a bunch of news articles coming out trying to defend American comic book sales because it appears that there's a possibility that one particular manga alone outsold everything in America, and that would be Demon Slayer. So let's go ahead and check out this article from comicbook.com. You know, the arbiters of truth. Let's see how they try to spin this. Did Demon Slayer really outsell the entire comics industry in 2020? There is no denying the popularity of Demon Slayer. The franchise has broken almost every record there is when it comes to sales, whether it be manga, anime, or film. The hit series remains an unprecedented success. So you can see why industry leaders have been comparing sales of manga to North American comics. But now, the question is being asked whether Demon Slayer really outsold the entire comics industry statewide last year. Seriously, if they're asking this question, that's a pretty good indication that manga is taking over American comic book sales because of one single property, Demon Slayer, is being asked the question if it outsold everything else combined. And yes, Demon Slayer is extremely popular, but they have so many anime and manga properties over here in the United States now. And there are specifically 2 anime streaming services, Funimation and Crunchyroll. It really makes you think, who cares if Demon Slayer outsold everything? If the question is being asked if Demon Slayer outsold everything by itself, even if it didn't, add in 1 or 2 more different properties, and it has. And the answer to that question? Well, it is not clear at the moment. If sales trends in the U.S. remained untouched in 2020, the truth would lead fans to a tie. But there's a slight issue of the pandemic to consider. Let's investigate, shall we? There is no doubt that 2020 put a major bust on industries globally in light of the pandemic. This was no different for manga or comic books. But production delays with the former were solved rather quickly. According to financial reports and various sales charts, manga exploded in popularity in 2020 with major gains year over year despite the pandemic. In Japan, this boost was all thanks to Demon Slayer. But those same stats aren't clear in the United States. According to Comichron, the site has yet to pull together sales info for 2020 when it comes to comic sales. Why? Why haven't you pulled it together yet? We're halfway through 2021 and you don't have the data for 2020? Are you hiding something? I think you're hiding something. The issue comes down to a rift between Diamond as the distributor for once the only vendor for retailers to order comics from. The pandemic prompted several major publishers like Marvel and DC to begin distributions of their own when Diamond had to shut down operations temporarily in light of all of this means data reporting is massively inconsistent for 2020. But we do have trends to look at. Having only one option as your distribution source was stupid. American comic books fell into a very, very stupid way of thinking when it came to distribution of comics. Marvel and DC got desperate and said, screw this, we're going to start distributing our own stuff. They should have done that 10 years ago. I guess better late than never, though. But it still might be too late because what you're putting out is garbage. So it doesn't really matter who distributes it. A trash man is a trash man no matter what uniform he has on. At best, we can assume no change in trends happened in comics this past year despite the pandemic. In that case, total units sold in 2019 numbered 83.2 million after dropping 1.2 million year over year. If that exact same scenario repeated in 2020, there were roughly 82 million comics sold in 2020 regardless of distributor at the absolute best. Now let's compare that figure to Demon Slayer. A total of 82.34 million copies of Demon Slayer were sold last year. A total number of 82.34 million copies of Demon Slayer were sold last year. Their distributor has the numbers. American Comics claim that they can't get the numbers, but at best, it would be 82. At best. That's what the article said, right? At best, 82. And this is 82.34. Is there a question that Demon Slayer outsold all of American Comics combined? I mean, until we get the hard data, maybe you can have that question. Maybe their numbers are actually low estimates and we would be surprised. I highly doubt it, because only losing 1.2 million as their best case scenario doesn't really seem to line up with where people are putting their money. If people are putting their money into Demon Slayer and manga and watching anime and abandoning the American comic books because we're tired of being preached to, and we're tired of the woke trash, and we're tired of the PC culture, and we're tired of the cancel culture. If we don't like it, we're bigots. Something tells me that 82 million sales for 2020 for American comics is actually a really high estimate. This figure does outperform the best case estimate of the US comics industry. And that is nuts in and of itself. Now, it's not really nuts. A lot of people have been calling this for years. I have several friends who told me for the longest time, get into manga, get into anime. It's where the good stories are still being told. And I was in denial for the longest time. I just stopped collecting comics 5 or 6 years ago on the American side, and I just started picking up manga, and I just started watching anime with my daughter. And I'll admit, as a 38-year-old dad of 3 girls, I'm hooked. I watch as much as I possibly can, and I don't have a lot of downtime. But whenever I do, my downtime consists of catching up on Demon Slayer. I'm all caught up on My Hero Academia. I still need to catch up more on Attack on Titan. And I've gotten a bunch of requests from the previous video on other things that I should be watching and reading. And I'm taking all of those comments into consideration. And I am making a list from those comments of all of the stuff that have been recommended to me. Because the American comic book industry abandoned the American comic book reader a long time ago. I realized it about 5 or 6 years ago. And a lot of other people started realizing it in the past year or two. They don't care about telling good stories anymore. They care about identity politics. They care about woke PC nonsense. Thrown in, crammed in, forced in, poorly written stories by people who claim to be writers, but are really just a bunch of activists. This is where the American comic book industry stands right now. It's very sad. As a lifelong comic book fan, as a lifelong DC fan, as an avid Marvel reader in the 90s whenever the X-Men got revamped, when Spider-Man was at his peak, when the Avengers were actually starting to become relevant in the comics in the early 2000s, right before the MCU happened. Like I said a couple of weeks ago, the American comic book industry is dead. But we're not the ones who did it. The American comic book industry committed suicide because they did this to themselves. They listened to a couple of idiots on Twitter. They paid attention to a couple of blue check marks who wrote garbage articles talking about not enough diversity, not enough representation, and decided to focus solely on that instead of developing good characters and telling good stories. Now, sure, there are a few that come out from time to time that still have good fleshed out characters and tell a good story. But it's so few and far between now that it's becoming unnoticeable because we're not paying attention. And one of the biggest things that the American comic book industry has done to hide their failing numbers is blame piracy. I highly doubt that piracy is a problem because even a hungry thief is not going to steal a turd sandwich. So they've been hiding the numbers for years. So why is anybody surprised whenever they say that even after half a year, despite the fact that their distribution chain was broken last year, shouldn't really matter? We are more than 5 months into 2021 and you don't have the data? You can't make some phone calls? You can't look at some charts? You can't crunch some numbers and find out exactly where American comic book sales are for 2020? It really sounds like you're hiding something. American comics are desperate. They know that they're losing out, but they've gotten so deep into the woke rabbit hole, and it takes years to get out of it because comics are not just thought of and then released the next day. This stuff is planned out months in advance, and some stories sometimes years in advance. So are you just going to scrap all of your comics, not put anything out for a couple of years, and reboot again? I mean, we've had enough reboots from American comics. It's one of the things that's actually gotten a lot of people really upset about American comics. You follow a story and then all of a sudden your story ends and they reboot it and they start it back over. But now they've done a bunch of race swaps and now a bunch of characters are gay for no reason who have not been gay for decades. We're tired of the reboots. We're tired of being preached to. We're tired of you throwing your politics in there. You have some authors claiming, if you don't like my politics, then don't buy my book. Deal. I won't, because your book is trash, just like your politics are trash. Anyway, guys, what do you think about all of this? Do you think American comic books are hiding numbers because they're embarrassed? Do you think there's a legitimate reason why they don't have the numbers for 2020, 5 months into 2021? Do you think that the distribution chain being broken the way that it was last year really affected it that much? Or do you think they're covering something? Personally, I think they're hiding. I think they're embarrassed. Now, that's my own opinion. I'm curious to hear what you say. I'm curious to have your thoughts on this too. Let me know down in the comments. Make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video. Leave a comment. Let's have a conversation about this because this is, to me, this is really interesting stuff. Make sure you share this video. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Hit the bell to get notifications. This will be the last video for a couple of days. I am going out of town to go see some family. But I will be back with some new content on Monday. So until then, have a good weekend, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And as my kid says,
click on bell
to get notifications for upcoming videos.